You know that moment when your front door groans open at 3 a.m., sounding like it's auditioning for a low-budget slasher flick? Most people would be fumbling for a baseball bat, heart pounding like a bad techno beat. Not me. I was slouched in my living room, nursing a cold coffee that tasted like regret, my laptop screen casting a blue glow over a stack of files labeled Karen Whitaker, Neighborhood Tyrant. I'm an FBI agent, Economic Crimes Division, the nerdy side of the badge, and for the last 9 months, I've been peeling back the layers of Karen's little empire of extortion and fake authority. So when her posse of wannabe HOA cops busted into my house, flashlights waving like they were directing traffic, I didn't flinch. I was waiting for them. Let's rewind a bit. My name's Alex Harper, 40 years old, single, and the kind of guy who'd rather spend Friday nights cross-referencing bank records than swiping right. I moved to this sleepy suburban cul-de-sac in Willow Creek a year ago, chasing a quieter life after a decade of chasing Ponzi schemers and money launderers. The house was a fixer-upper, peeling paint, creaky floors, and a backyard that looked like it hosted a weed convention. But it was mine, and I liked it. What I didn't sign up for was Karen Whitaker, the self-proclaimed HOA president who strutted around like she owned the zip code. Karen was the kind of woman who'd clutch her HOA binder like it was the Constitution, and she was the founding mother. Blonde bob, always a shade too perfect, and a smile that screamed, "I'm about to ruin your day." She'd slap fines on people for unapproved mailbox colors or grass half an inch too long, then flash that grin like she was doing you a favor. Most neighbors just paid up to avoid her tirades. Me? I smelled a rat the second she slid a $200 fine under my door for non-compliant porch lighting. I mean, come on, Karen, my porch light's a bare bulb because I haven't had time to shop for aesthetic coherence. That's when I started digging. See, I've spent years sniffing out fraud, shell companies, fake invoices, you name it. Karen's HOA operation had all the red flags. No transparency, vague bylaws, and a bank account that seemed to have a personal relationship with her new Lexus. 9 months ago, I looped in my team at the FBI. We're a small unit, but we're good. Think less X-files and more Excel files. We started pulling records, tracking payments, and even got a warrant to monitor her emails. Turns out, Karen wasn't just a power-tripping busybody. She was running a racket, skimming thousands from the HOA while paying off a couple of local goons to pose as security to enforce her rules. These weren't real cops, just meatheads in rented uniforms who thought a badge bought at a surplus store made them Dirty Harry. The break-in wasn't a surprise. I'd been expecting it since I accidentally let slip at the last HOA meeting that I was looking into the association's finances. I stood up, all polite-like, and asked why the landscaping budget was $10,000, but the community park looked like a post-apocalyptic dog run. Karen's face went from smug to sour faster than you can say audit. Her eyes narrowed, and she muttered something about troublemakers. 2 days later, my mailbox was smashed, and I got a cryptic note. Back off, or regret it. Cute, Karen. Real subtle. So, there I was, 3 a.m., my living room lit only by my laptop and the faint glow of a street lamp outside. The air smelled like stale coffee and the pine cleaner I'd used to scrub the floors earlier. Because, yeah, I'm that guy who cleans before a showdown. My service weapon, a Glock 19, sat on the coffee table, unloaded but within reach, because I'm not an idiot, but I'm also not looking to escalate a B&E into a shootout. My phone was recording, hidden behind a stack of books, and my partner, Agent Lena Torres, was parked 2 blocks away, ready to roll if things got hairy. The plan was simple. Let Karen's goons make their move, catch them in the act, and use it to crack her operation wide open. The door creaked wider, and I heard boots scuffing on my hardwood. 2 figures stepped inside, their flashlights cutting through the dark like cheap lightsabers. One of them whispered, "Check the office first," in a voice that screamed, I peaked in high school. I smirked, leaning back in my chair, the leather creaking under me. These idiots thought they were about to catch me sleeping. Instead, they were walking into a trap I'd been building since the day Karen decided to play gangster. I took a slow sip of my coffee, the bitter taste grounding me, and thought, all right, Karen, Let's see how your fake cops like federal charges. The two wannabe cops shuffled into my house like they were auditioning for the world's worst heist movie. Their boots squeaked on my hardwood, and one of them, let's call him Meathead number 1, kept swinging his flashlight like he was signaling a plane. The beam caught my living room's peeling wallpaper, a charming relic of the previous owner's love for 80s florals. I stayed still in my armchair, shrouded in the dark, my coffee cup warming my hands. These clowns hadn't noticed me yet, and I wasn't about to roll out the welcome mat. 9 months of tracking Karen Whitaker's scams had led to this, and I was savoring the moment like a fine whiskey, or, well, like the burnt gas station coffee in my mug. Meathead number 1 hissed to his buddy. Check the desk in the back. She said he's got files. His voice had the gravelly confidence of someone who thinks a gym membership equals authority. Meathead number 2, shorter and wheezier, muttered, "This place gives me the creeps. Why is it so quiet?" "Oh, buddy, you have no idea." I stifled a chuckle, my lips curling into a smirk. The quiet was because I'd turned off the fridge's hum and even unplugged the ancient clock that ticked like a bomb. I wanted these idiots to feel every second of their bad decisions. Let's back up a smidge for context. Karen Whitaker didn't just wake up one day and decide to play suburban mob boss. My team's investigation revealed she'd been at this for years, turning Willow Creek's HOA into her personal piggy bank. She'd forged signatures to seize control of the board, funneled dues into her own accounts, and hired these fake security guys to intimidate anyone who asked questions. Her goons weren't exactly criminal masterminds. Think less Ocean's 11, more Ocean's 2 brain cells. But they were loyal, mostly because Karen paid them in cash and promises of power. My files, stacked neatly on my laptop, had bank records, emails, and even a grainy photo of Karen handing an envelope to Meathead number 1 at a gas station. The woman was about as subtle as a sledgehammer. I'd known they'd come for my files since that HOA meeting where I'd poked the bear. After my little stunt questioning the budget, Karen had doubled down. She sent me a new fine, $500 for obstructing community harmony. I framed that one. It's hanging in my bathroom. Then came the petty vandalism. My tires slashed, my garbage cans tipped over, and that charming note about backing off. But the real kicker was last week when my partner, Lena Torres, intercepted a call between Karen and her goons. Karen was spooked, ranting about that nosy Fed and ordering them to get the evidence from my house. So, I set the stage, left my office desk drawers slightly open, a few decoy files labeled HOA audit in plain sight, and waited for the show. Back to the present. Meathead number 1 crept toward my office, his flashlight beam bouncing off the hallway's chipped paint. Number 2 lingered near the living room, sniffing the air like a confused bloodhound. "Smells like coffee," he whispered, and I nearly snorted. "Yeah, genius. That's because I'm sitting 10 feet away, ready to make your night a federal offense." I shifted slightly, my chair creaking just enough to make number 2 freeze. His flashlight whipped toward me, catching the edge of my coffee table. "You hear that?" he squeaked, voice cracking like a teenager's. Number 1 hissed, "Shut up, Carl. It's an old house." Carl. Perfect. I now had a name for the wheezy one. I made a mental note to cross-reference it with my files later. For now, I let them fumble deeper into my trap. My phone, hidden behind a stack of dog-eared paperbacks, was still recording, capturing every word and scuff of their boots. Lena was on standby, her earpiece linked to mine, probably biting her lip to keep from laughing. She'd bet me $20 these guys would trip over their own egos before dawn. I was starting to think I'd owe her. As they reached the office, I heard drawers rattling. "Got something," Carl Whisper yelled, holding up one of my decoy files like it was the Holy Grail. The file was a masterpiece. Fake bank statements, forged HOA letters, and just enough truth to make Karen sweat when it inevitably reached her. I'd sprinkled in some red herrings, mentions of a non-existent offshore account to keep her paranoid. Number 1 grabbed the file, flipping through it with all the finesse of a toddler with a coloring book. "This is it," he said. "Let's go." "Not so fast, fellas." I flicked on the desk lamp beside me, flooding the room with light. Both goons jumped like they'd been tossed, Carl dropping the file with a yelp. I leaned forward, coffee mug in hand, and grinned. Evening, gentlemen. Looking for something specific, or is breaking and entering just your cardio for the night? Their flashlights swung toward me, and I saw their faces for the first time. Number one, a beefy guy with a buzz cut and a scar on his cheek, looked like he'd just realized he forgot his lines. Carl, scrawny and pale, was already sweating through his fake badge. This was going to be fun. The living room lamp cast a harsh glow on meathead number one and Carl, who stood frozen like deer caught in a spotlight, except these deer were holding flashlights and fake badges. My coffee mug steamed faintly in my hand, the bitter aroma mixing with the musty scent of my old house. I leaned back in my armchair, legs crossed, and gave them my best, "You're so screwed" smirk. "So," I said, voice dripping with the kind of sarcasm that could curdle milk, "is this the part where you tell me you're just here to check my smoke detectors? Or did Karen send you to steal my top secret cookie recipe?" Buzz cut, meathead number one, recovered first, puffing out his chest like a budget action hero. "You don't know who you're messing with, pal," he growled, gripping the decoy file like it was his lifeline. Carl, still clutching his flashlight like a security blanket, stammered, "We're HOA security. You're in violation." I almost laughed. Violation? The only violation here was their attempt at intimidation, which was about as convincing as a dollar store Halloween costume. "HOA security, huh?" I said, tilting my head. Funny, I didn't see breaking and entering in the bylaws. But then again, Karen's not big on reading the fine print, is she? I set my mug down on the coffee table with a deliberate clink, letting the sound hang in the air. My Glock was still there, unloaded but visible, just to keep them on edge. Buzzcut's eyes flicked to it, and I saw a bead of sweat roll down his temple. Good. I wanted them nervous. 9 months of digging into Karen Whitaker's scams had taught me one thing. Her minions weren't exactly Navy SEALs. Let's pause for a second to talk about Karen's operation, because it's almost impressive in its audacity. My team had uncovered a web of fake invoices, inflated contracts, and emergency fees that funneled HOA dues straight to her. She'd even set up a shell company, Willow Creek Landscaping Solutions, real creative, to siphon funds for park maintenance. That never happened. The park, by the way, was a patch of dirt with one sad swing set and a bench that looked like it had PTSD. Karen's emails, which we'd been monitoring thanks to a federal warrant, showed her coordinating with Buzzcut and Carl, promising them a cut if they handled troublemakers like me, breaking into my house. That was her desperate attempt to stop me before I blew her whole scheme sky high. Back to the moment. Buzzcut took a step forward, trying to loom over me. "Hand over the rest of your files, and maybe we don't report you for obstructing HOA business," he said, voice low but shaky. I raised an eyebrow. "Report me? To who?" "The Karen Court of Suburban Justice." "Sorry, pal," I answered to a slightly higher authority. I tapped my earpiece, where Lena was listening, probably stifling a laugh. She'd texted me earlier. "These guys sound like they rehearsed in a strip mall parking lot." She wasn't wrong. Carl, still hovering near the hallway, piped up, "We know you've been snooping. Karen said you're trying to ruin everything." His voice cracked, and I couldn't help it. I chuckled. "Ruin everything?" "Carl, buddy, Karen's doing a fine job of that herself. Ever wonder where your paychecks come from? Hint, it's not her sparkling personality." His eyes widened, and I saw the gears grinding in his head. Doubt was a beautiful thing. Before Buzzcut could try another tough guy line, I heard a faint rustle outside. Right on cue. The front door was still ajar, letting in a chilly breeze that smelled like wet grass and asphalt. I'd left it open for a reason, not just to make Karen's goons feel cocky, but to give my backup an easy entry. Lena wasn't alone out there. I'd recruited an unexpected ally. Mrs. Evelyn Chun, my next-door neighbor, a 70-year-old retiree with a knack for gardening and a grudge against Karen. Evelyn had caught Karen's goons uprooting her prize roses last month, claiming they were non-compliant. She'd been feeding me intel ever since, including photos of Buzzcut's truck parked at Karen's house late at night. Evelyn was no snitch. She was a strategist, and she wanted Karen's head on a metaphorical pike. I stood up slowly, stretching like I had all the time in the world. Here's the deal, fellas, I said, keeping my tone light but sharp. You've got about 30 seconds to explain why you're in my house before this gets real official. I tapped my earpiece again, loud enough for them to hear the static. Buzzcut's bravado faltered, and Carl looked like he was about to bolt. Then, from the porch, came a sharp clack, Evelyn's cane on the floorboards. "Alex, dear," she called, her voice sweet as pie but laced with venom. "Are these the boys who think they can waltz into our homes like they own the place?" Buzzcut spun toward the door, flashlight wobbling. Evelyn stood silhouetted in the doorway, her tiny frame wrapped in a floral robe, holding her cane like a samurai sword. Behind her, I caught a glimpse of Lena's shadow, ready to move if needed. The air grew thick, the kind of tension you feel when a storm's about to break. I grinned wider. "Gentlemen, meet my neighbor. She's got a green thumb and a mean right hook. Now, let's talk about Karen." The air in my living room was thick with tension, the kind that makes your skin prickle like you're standing too close to a live wire. Buzzcut and Carl, Karen's fake HOA cops, stood caught in the glow of my desk lamp, their flashlights now dangling like useless props. My neighbor Evelyn Shun, all 4'11" of her, blocked the doorway with her cane, looking like a floral-robed avenging angel. Behind her, Agent Lena Torres lingered in the shadows, her hand near her holster, ready to turn this midnight circus into a federal takedown. I leaned against my coffee table, Glock still in sight, and let the silence stretch just long enough to make Carl's forehead glisten. "So," I said, my voice sharp as a paper cut, "you boys ready to spill about Karen's little crime syndicate? Or do we need to make this a field trip to the FBI office?" Buzzcut tried to puff himself up again, but it was like watching a balloon with a slow leak. "You can't prove anything," he growled, clutching my decoy file like it was his get-out-of-jail-free card. Carl, meanwhile, looked like he was mentally drafting his resignation letter. We were just doing our job," he squeaked, his flashlight shaking so hard it lit up the ceiling like a disco ball. I rolled my eyes. "Your job? Carl, unless your job description includes felony B and E, you're about as legit as Karen's spray tan. Let's take a quick detour to appreciate how deep Karen's claws were in Willow Creek. My team's 9-month investigation had uncovered a gold mine of dirt, fake vendor contracts, doctored HOA minutes, and a bank account in Karen's name that was fatter than her ego. She'd been bleeding the neighborhood dry, charging us for upgrades, like a $5,000 fountain that was just a rusty pipe in the park. Her emails to Buzzcut, real name Tony Russo, by the way, showed she'd paid him and Carl to secure the neighborhood, which mostly meant scaring old ladies like Evelyn into paying fines for imaginary infractions. Tony was a washed-up bouncer with a rap sheet for petty theft. Carl was just a guy who answered a Craigslist ad. Karen's dream team, ladies and gentlemen. Back to the scene. Evelyn tapped her cane on the floorboards, each clack like a judge's gavel. "You tore up my roses, you little thug," she said to Tony, her voice sweet but venomous. "And now you're in Alex's house, thinking you're untouchable? Oh, honey, you picked the wrong street." Tony's scar twitched, and I could practically hear his brain scrambling for an exit strategy. Carl, poor Carl, was already inching toward the door, but Evelyn's cane swung up like a gate, stopping him cold. "Not so fast," she said. "I've got a phone full of photos of your truck at Karen's at 2 a.m. Care to explain?" I couldn't help it. I laughed, a low, dark chuckle that made Tony flinch. "Yeah, Tony, tell us about those late-night cash drops. Or should I pull the bank records myself?" I tapped my earpiece, where Lena was feeding me real-time updates. She'd just texted, "Got eyes on Karen's house. Lights on." She's pacing. "Nervous much?" I smirked, knowing Karen was probably clutching her precious HOA binder, wondering why her goons weren't back yet. The woman had no idea her empire was crumbling faster than my house's drywall. Tony finally found his voice, but it was less tough guy and more guy who just realized he's in a horror movie. "You're bluffing," he said, but his eyes darted to Carl, who was now sweating enough to fill that non-existent fountain. I stood up, slow and deliberate, and walked toward them, stopping just close enough to smell Tony's cheap cologne. Bluffing? Nah. I'm the guy who spent 9 months building a case while you were playing rent-a-cop. Here's a tip. Next time you break into an FBI agent's house, check for hidden cameras. I nodded toward the bookshelf, where my phone's red recording light blinked like a smug little eye. Carl let out a whimper, dropping his flashlight. It rolled across the floor, illuminating a cobweb in the corner I'd meant to clean. Oops. Tony, though, wasn't ready to fold. He took a step toward me, fists clenched. You think you're smart, huh? Karen's got friends. Big friends. I raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. Big friends? What? Like the guy who sold you that badge at the flea market. Sit down, Tony, before you hurt yourself. Before he could respond, Evelyn piped up, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife through butter. Oh, and tell Karen her landscaping company is about to get a visit from the IRS. My nephew's an accountant, and he's got questions. Evelyn's nephew, David, was indeed an accountant, but he was also my second ally, quietly feeding me Karen's tax filings that screamed fraud louder than her megaphone at HOA meetings. The woman hadn't paid taxes on her consulting fees in years. Rookie mistake. The room went quiet, save for the faint hum of crickets outside and Carl's heavy breathing. Tony's bravado was cracking, and I could see him calculating his odds. Spoiler, they weren't good. Lena's voice crackled in my earpiece. Alex, Karen's on the move. Car just pulled out of her driveway. Want me to intercept? I tapped my earpiece twice, our signal for hold position. I wanted Karen to think her plan was still in play. Let her come closer. Let her think she was winning. Because when I dropped the hammer, I wanted her to feel every nail. Last chance, boys, I said, crossing my arms. Talk, or we do this the hard way. And trust me, the hard way involves paperwork, and I hate paperwork. The threat hung in the air, heavy as the damp night breeze slipping through the open door. Tony's jaw tightened, but Carl looked ready to spill his entire life story. The clock was ticking, and Karen was coming. Game on. The living room felt like a pressure cooker, the air heavy with the scent of Tony's knockoff cologne and Carl's nervous sweat. My desk lamp threw stark shadows across the peeling wallpaper, making buzzcut Tony look like a B-movie villain clutching my decoy file, while Carl stood frozen, his dropped flashlight still spinning lazily on the floor. Evelyn Chun, my 70-year-old neighbor-turned-accomplice, leaned on her cane in the doorway, her floral robe practically glowing with righteous fury. Outside, Lena's shadow shifted in the moonlight, her earpiece feeding me updates. Karen Whitaker, our suburban crime lord, was on her way, speeding down Willow Creek's quiet streets in her shiny Lexus. I grinned, sharp and predatory, like a cat watching a mouse nibble on bait. Time's up, boys, I said, my voice laced with enough sarcasm to make a comedian jealous. Your boss is about to crash this party, and I've got front row seats. Tony's scar twitched as he tried to muster some bravado. Karen's gonna bury you, he spat, but his grip on the file was shaky, like a kid holding a stolen cookie. Carl, meanwhile, was unraveling faster than a cheap sweater. I didn't sign up for this, he blurted, eyes darting to Evelyn's cane like it might sprout lasers. I chuckled, leaning forward. Oh, Carl, you signed up the second you took Karen's cash. Pro tip, next time, read the job description for felony accomplice. Spoiler, it doesn't come with a pension. Let's zoom out for a second to paint the bigger picture. Karen's HOA scam was a masterclass in suburban greed. My team had spent 9 months untangling her web. Fake landscaping contracts, inflated repair bills, and a community fund that mysteriously funded her kitchen remodel. We'd traced her shell company to a P.O. box in a strip mall, and her emails. Oh, those emails were a goldmine of incriminating arrogance. One gem had her telling Tony to make sure that Nosy Fed regrets sticking his nose in my business. Lady, I live for Nosy. My files, safely backed up on a secure server, included bank records, witness statements from neighbors, and even a recording of Karen berating a retiree for planting unauthorized tulips. The woman was a walking caricature of entitlement, and I was about to serve her a reality check with a side of handcuffs. Back in the moment, Evelyn stepped forward, her cane tapping a slow, deliberate rhythm on my creaky floorboards. "You know," she said, her voice dripping with mock sweetness, "I've lived here 40 years, and I've never seen an HOA president with a private security team. Care to explain, young man?" She fixed Tony with a stare that could wilt her prize roses. Tony's jaw clenched, but before he could answer, Carl cracked like an egg on asphalt. "It's not my fault," he wailed, pointing at Tony. "He said it was just intimidation. Scare him. Grab the files, no big deal." I raised an eyebrow, exchanging a glance with Evelyn, who smirked like she'd just won bingo. "Intimidation, huh?" I said, crossing my arms. "So, breaking into my house at 3 a.m. is just Karen's version of a strongly worded letter?" "Cute." I tapped my earpiece, where Lena's voice crackled. "Karen's 2 minutes out. Blue Lexus, license plate matches. Looks twitchy." I could picture Karen gripping her steering wheel, her perfect bob bouncing as she muttered about her authority. The woman thought she was untouchable, but she was driving straight into a trap I'd been crafting since the day she fined me for my porch light. I turned to Tony, who was still trying to play tough. "Here's the math, Tony," I said, ticking off points on my fingers. "Breaking and entering, theft, conspiracy. Oh, and impersonating an officer. That's, what, 10 years if the judge is grumpy? But I'm a reasonable guy. Tell me about Karen's big friends, and maybe I don't bury you in paperwork." Tony's eyes narrowed, but I saw the flicker of fear. He wasn't just a hired thug. He was in deep, and he knew it. Before he could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from David, Evelyn's accountant nephew, who'd been digging into Karen's taxes. "Found another account," it read. "Offshore, Cayman Islands. $50,000 in deposits last month." I stifled a grin. Karen was sloppy, leaving digital breadcrumbs a rookie could follow. I'd already tipped off the IRS, and they were itching to audit her into next century. But first, I needed her here, caught red-handed with her goons. Evelyn, bless her, kept the pressure on. "My nephew's got friends at the tax office," she said, her tone casual but cutting. "They love a good fraud case. And Karen's been dodging taxes longer than I've been dodging her meetings." Carl whimpered, sinking to the floor, his fake badge clattering against the hardwood. Tony shot him a look that screamed, "Traitor," but the dynamic was shifting. Carl was a weak link, and I was about to snap it. Then, headlights flashed through my front window, slicing across the room like a warning shot. Tires crunched on the gravel outside, and a car door slammed. Karen was here. I heard her heels clicking up my walkway, sharp and purposeful, like she was storming a boardroom instead of a crime scene. My pulse quickened, not from fear, but from the thrill of the hunt. 9 months of late nights, coffee-fueled stakeouts, and Lena's endless teasing about my Karen obsession were about to pay off. I nodded to Evelyn, who stepped aside just enough to let Karen's silhouette fill the doorway. "Showtime." Karen Whitaker's silhouette filled my doorway, her blonde bob catching the moonlight like a halo she didn't deserve. Her heels clicked on my porch like a metronome set to entitled rage, and the air carried a whiff of her floral perfume, the kind that screams, "I spent $200 to smell like a department store." Inside, Tony and Carl looked like they'd just seen their own obituaries, clutching my decoy file and a dropped flashlight, respectively. Evelyn Shin stood by the door, her cane poised like a duelist's sword, while Lena's shadow loomed outside, ready to pounce. I leaned against my coffee table, my Glock in sight, and gave Karen a smile sharp enough to cut through her ego. Well, I said, sarcasm dripping like motor oil. "The Queen of Willow Creek graces my humble home. To what do I owe the 3 a.m. house call? Checking my curb appeal?" Karen's eyes, cold as the asphalt outside, flicked from me to her goons. "What is this?" she snapped, her voice a mix of fury and panic, like a CEO caught shredding documents. She wore a tailored blazer over yoga pants, like she'd dressed for both a board meeting and a midnight crime spree. Tony stammered. He was awake. "Karen. He's got cameras." Carl, practically melting into the floor, added, "He's FBI." I chuckled, shaking my head. "Oh, Carl, you're the gift that keeps on giving. Tell her about the files while you're at it." Let's rewind for a second to appreciate the stakes. My 9-month investigation into Karen's HOA racket had peeled back layers of fraud thicker than her makeup. She'd siphoned tens of thousands from neighbors, using fake contracts and inflated fees, all while hiding behind her president title like it was a crown. My team had bank records, wiretap calls, and even a neighbor's video of Karen tossing a rival's campaign signs in a dumpster during the last HOA election. The decoy file Tony held was bait. Fake enough to spook her, real enough to make her sweat. And now, with her standing in my living room, caught with her goons, I had her on tape for conspiracy, breaking and entering, and probably bad fashion choices. Karen's face twisted, but she recovered fast, clutching her HOA binder like a shield. "You're out of your depth, Alex," she said, spitting my name like it was a curse. "This is HOA business. You're obstructing our authority." I laughed, loud and mean, the sound bouncing off my peeling walls. "Authority? Karen, your authority comes from a laser printer and a superiority complex. I've got a federal badge and a warrant with your name on it. Want to guess which one wins?" Her jaw tightened, but I saw the flicker of doubt in her eyes. She wasn't used to people fighting back. Evelyn, bless her, didn't miss a beat. "You find me $300 for my roses, Karen," she said, her voice sweet as arsenic. "But you didn't mention your landscaping company's a P.O. box in a strip mall. Care to explain?" Karen's head snapped toward Evelyn, and for a split second, I thought she might lunge. Instead, she sneered, "Stay out of this, old woman." "Oh, bad move." Evelyn's cane tapped the floor, and her eyes gleamed with the kind of fire that could burn down empires. "Call me old again," she said, "and I'll make sure my nephew's IRS friends dig so deep into your taxes, you'll need a snorkel." I glanced at Tony, who was shifting like he wanted to bolt. Carl was already a lost cause, muttering apologies to no one in particular. I stepped closer to Karen, keeping my tone light, but deadly. "Here's the deal," I said. "Your boys broke into my house. You're here, coordinating a felony. I've got it all on tape, plus 9 months of evidence that says you're running a racket. So, unless you've got a time machine in that Lexus, you're done." Karen's eyes darted to the bookshelf, where my phone's recording light blinked like a smug little snitch. Her face paled, but she doubled down, because of course she did. "You think you're clever?" she hissed, stepping into the room, her heels clicking like a countdown. "I have friends in this town. People who matter. You'll regret this." I tilted my head, unfazed. "Friends? Like Tony and Carl here? Or the city clerk you bribed to ignore your forged signatures?" "Yeah, we know about that too." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. "Checkmate, Karen." Lena's voice crackled in my earpiece. Got a visual on a second car pulling up. Black SUV, tinted windows. Looks like her big friends. My pulse kicked up a notch, not from fear, but from the thrill of the game. Karen's so-called friends were likely more hired muscle, maybe someone higher up her chain of corruption. I'd planned for this. My team had a second unit on standby, parked a block away, ready to swarm if things got messy. I tapped my earpiece twice, signaling Lena to hold, but be ready. Outside, the SUV's engine rumbled, and I heard gravel crunch under tires. The air grew heavier, like the moment before a storm breaks. I turned to Karen, my grin widening. "Sounds like your cavalry's here," I said. "Hope they're better at this than Tony and Carl, because these two are about to audition for the world's saddest perp walk." Karen's eyes flashed with something dangerous, desperation, maybe, but I was ready. The trap was set, and she'd walked right into it. Now, it was time to see how far she'd fall. The rumble of the black SUV outside my house was like the growl of a dog that didn't know it was on a leash. Karen Whitaker stood in my living room, her perfect bob slightly askew, clutching her HOA binder like it could save her from the mess she'd made. Tony and Carl, her fake cop goons, were unraveling faster than my patience, with Tony gripping my decoy file and Carl practically sobbing on my hardwood floor. Evelyn Chun, my cane-wielding neighbor, blocked the doorway, her eyes gleaming with the kind of glee you get when karma's about to deliver a knockout. Lena's voice buzzed in my earpiece. "SUVs parked. 2 guys, suits, not local. Want me to move?" I tapped my earpiece once, stand by. My grin was sharp enough to slice through Karen's bravado. Sounds like your VIPs arrived, Karen, I said, my voice dripping with mock cheer. Hope they brought better game than these two, because this is starting to feel like a low-rent crime drama. Karen's eyes flicked to the window, where the SUV's headlights cut through the pre-dawn gloom, painting my peeling walls with stark white streaks. Her lips twitched, trying to muster that smug HOA president smile, but it was cracking like cheap nail polish. You're in over your head, Alex, she said, her voice tight as a piano wire. My friends run this town. You're just a nosy nobody with a badge. I laughed, low and mean, the sound mingling with the faint creak of my floorboards. Run this town? Karen, your friends are about to run into a federal indictment. But please, tell me more about your imaginary clout. Let's take a quick step back to set the stage. My 9-month investigation into Karen's HOA scam had uncovered a cesspool of fraud, fake contracts, siphoned dues, and a network of small-time players she'd roped in with promises of cash and power. The SUV outside likely carried her big friends, probably the shady lawyer who'd notarized her forged HOA documents or the city clerk she'd bribed to look the other way. My team had their names, bank records, and even a wiretap call where the clerk complained about Karen's pushy attitude. The decoy file Tony held was designed to spook her, stuffed with just enough real data to make her panic. My real evidence, safely encrypted on a server, backed up twice, because I'm not the idiot Karen thought I was. Back to the moment. Evelyn tapped her cane, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife through warm butter. You know, Karen, she said, my roses never recovered from your goon's visit, but I'm thinking a nice subpoena might cheer me up. Karen's glare could have melted steel, but Evelyn just smiled, sweet as poison. Carl, meanwhile, was a puddle of regret. I didn't know it was this serious, he wailed, pointing at Tony. He said it was just a quick job. Tony hissed, shut up, Carl, but the damage was done. I caught Evelyn's eye, and she gave me a nod. Teamwork makes the dream work. Outside, car doors slammed, and heavy footsteps crunched on my gravel driveway. Karen's posture straightened, like she thought her cavalry would storm in and save her. I leaned closer, lowering my voice. Here's a fun fact, Karen, I said. My team's been watching your friends for weeks. That SUV? We've got its plates, its owner, and a warrant to search it. Wanna bet we find something fun, like, say, an envelope of cash. Her face froze, and for the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. Gotcha. The front door swung open, and 2 men in suits stepped in, their faces hard but nervous, like guys who'd been promised an easy gig and just realized they'd been lied to. The taller one, with a goatee that screamed midlife crisis, scanned the room, his eyes landing on me. You Harper? He asked, voice gruff. I nodded, casual as if we were meeting for coffee. That's me. And you must be the muscle Karen thinks will scare off the FBI. Spoiler, it won't. Goatee frowned, glancing at Karen, who snapped. Do your job. Get the files and get him out of here. I raised a hand, slow and deliberate. Before you do anything stupid, I said, check the bookshelf. Red light, blinking. That's a federal recording device, and it's been catching every word since your boys kicked in my door. Goatee's eyes widened, and his partner, a stocky guy with a bad tie, froze. Lena's voice crackled in my ear, backups rolling in. 30 seconds out. I tapped my earpiece twice, signaling her to move. The air was electric, the kind of tension that makes your hair stand up. Karen's face was a mask of fury, but her hands trembled around her binder. Evelyn, never one to miss a beat, piped up. Oh, and boys, she said to the suits. My nephew's IRS friends are very interested in Karen's offshore account. $50,000 last month alone. Sound familiar? Goatee's jaw tightened, and Bad Time muttered something under his breath. Karen spun on Evelyn, practically spitting. You're lying, she hissed, but her voice cracked, betraying her. I smirked. Lying? Nah, we're just getting started. Wait till you see what we've got on your lawyer buddy here. I nodded at Goatee, whose face was now the color of my coffee-stained mug. Headlights flashed outside again, my backup, right on time. Car doors opened, and I heard the familiar click of Lena's boots on the porch. Karen's empire was crumbling, and she knew it. The suits exchanged a look, clearly rethinking their life choices. I leaned back, savoring the moment. "Tick-tock, Karen," I said. "Your throne's about to get repossessed." The living room was a pressure cooker ready to pop, the air thick with the smell of Karen's overpriced perfume and the faint metallic tang of panic. Karen Whitaker stood clutching her HOA binder, her face a mix of fury and fear as her fake cops, Tony and Carl, crumbled under the weight of their own bad decisions. Tony gripped my decoy file like it was his last shred of dignity, while Carl was a whimpering mess, his fake badge lying on my hardwood like a discarded toy. Evelyn Shun, my cane-wielding neighbor, stood by the door, her floral robe practically radiating smug satisfaction. Outside, Lena and my FBI backup team rolled up, their headlights slicing through the dawn like a guillotine. I leaned against my coffee table, my Glock still in sight, and flashed Karen a grin sharp enough to cut her ego in half. "Well, Karen," I said, sarcasm thicker than the dust on my ceiling fan. "Looks like your reign as Willow Creek's dictator just got an eviction notice." Karen's eyes darted to the window, where the red and blue lights of FBI vehicles flickered, turning my front yard into a low-budget crime scene. Her big friends, goatee and bad tie, the suits who'd stormed in thinking they'd save her, were frozen, their tough guy act fading faster than Karen's spray tan. Goatee muttered, "This wasn't the deal," while bad tie looked like he was mentally updating his LinkedIn. Lena stepped through the doorway, her badge glinting, followed by two agents in tactical vests. "FBI," she announced, voice calm but deadly. "Hands where we can see them. Now." Carl practically threw his hands up, while Tony dropped the decoy file, pages scattering like confetti at a funeral. Let's recap the masterpiece of Karen's downfall. 9 months ago, I'd started digging into her HOA scam after she fined me for my porch light. My team uncovered a cesspool of fraud, fake contracts, siphoned dues, and an offshore account that screamed tax evasion. We had bank records, wiretap calls, and neighbor testimonies, plus Evelyn's photos of Tony's truck at Karen's house. The decoy file was my bait, laced with just enough truth to make Karen panic, while my real evidence was locked in a server, ready to bury her. Her break-in tonight, caught on my hidden camera, was the cherry on top, conspiracy, B and E, and a side of stupidity. Karen thought she was untouchable, but she'd just walked into a federal trap. Karen tried one last power play, thrusting her binder forward like it was a magic shield. "This is harassment," she shrieked, her voice hitting a pitch that could shatter glass. "I'm the HOA president. I have rights." I laughed, a dark, rolling sound that echoed off my peeling walls. "Rights? Karen, you lost those when you turned the HOA into your personal ATM. Also, pro tip, presidents don't send goons to break into houses at 3 a.m. That's more of a mob boss vibe." Lena snorted, cuffing Carl, who was now muttering apologies to the floor. Tony, still trying to look tough, got a swift nudge from an agent, his hands zip-tied before he could blink. Evelyn, never one to miss a jab, tapped her cane. "You know, Karen," she said, "I'd say I'm surprised, but I've seen snakes with more integrity. My roses send their regards." Karen's face twisted, and she lunged toward Evelyn, but Lena stepped in, her hand on her holster. "Try it," Lena said, "and you'll be picking your teeth off Alex's floor." Karen froze, her binder slipping to the ground, pages spilling like her dreams of suburban domination. The suits were next. Goatee, who I'd pegged as Karen's shady lawyer, tried to negotiate. "I'm just a consultant," he said, hands raised. I smirked. "Consultant? Buddy, we've got your emails to Karen about forging HOA votes. You're consulting your way to a cell." Bad tie, the city clerk, just hung his head, already resigned to his fate. Lena's team bagged my decoy file as evidence, while my phone's recording, still blinking on the bookshelf, captured every glorious second. Here's the twist I'd been saving. As Karen was cuffed, ranting about her connections, I pulled out my phone and played a snippet of a call we'd intercepted last week. It was Karen begging a local councilman to fix her audit problem, promising him a cut of her next scam. The councilman, smarter than her, had already flipped, spilling everything to my team. Karen's face went white as my coffee table, her mouth opening and closing like a fish on dry land. You can't, she stammered. I leaned in, voice low. Oh, I can. And I did. Smile. Karen, you're starring in a federal indictment. The agents let her out, her heels dragging as she muttered about lawsuits. Tony and Carl followed, heads down, while Goatee and Bad Tie were stuffed into separate cars. Evelyn watched from the porch, her cane tapping a victory rhythm. Told you I'd get her, she said, winking. I grinned, handing her my coffee mug. You're my MVP, Evelyn. Drinks on me later. Lena, securing the scene, shot me a look. You owe me $20, Harper. Told you they'd fold before dawn. As the sun crept up, painting my yard in soft pinks, I stood on my porch, the air smelling of dew and justice. Karen's Lexus was towed, her binder confiscated, and her empire reduced to a case file. The neighborhood would need a new HOA president, maybe Evelyn, if she didn't scare everyone off with her cane. Me? I'd sleep for a week, then frame Karen's $500 fine as a trophy. Sometimes, the best revenge is a trap well set. Thank you for being with us. Please share in the comments where you are watching from and whether you liked everything, and see you next time.